Hello, I'm Leroy Deabler, and it's a privilege for me to speak to you about the history and some highlights of the Houston Preaching Mission. A lot of you may think that Houston means Houston, Texas, but it's really Houston, the name of a family, a couple, who lived across the street from the Central United Methodist Church. In 1948 and 49, established a foundation. It's a self-perpetuating gift, a foundation to provide excellent preaching for our region. And first, I'd like to thank a few people. JUDY HAGLER has assembled a lot of documents and history in the Living Sunday School class, which is on the third floor. Living Values class. She has done the history of the preaching mission over the years with all the speakers and photographs. So if anyone wants to see that at our church, contact JUDY HAGLER. Also like to thank Vicki Eisenhower for the bulletin boards that she assembled over the years for the Houston Preaching Mission, and Reverend Carol Karkin for arranging the speaker, who is an excellent selection. Bishop-elect North Carolina, who is Ken Carter. And Ken Carter was a former bishop for Alabama and portions of Florida prior to accepting this position as bishop in North Carolina. His office will take effect in September. He will be speaking to us for 3 services, 2 in the morning and 1 in the evening. We'll have lunch and dinner arranged, hopefully meeting all of the criteria involved with the COVID virus so that people will be safe and will be spaced out, and much of the luncheon will be held outdoors on October the 3rd. So we want to welcome you all to that wonderful experience which we're about to have at the Houston Preaching Mission. I'd like to say a little bit more about our speaker, Ken Carter. He served on the Council of Bishops and was a leader in the Move Forward initiative of the Methodist Church throughout the United States. He was a leader in that group on the topic of moving forward. He has served on a number of committees and written many articles and professional publications. He was former pastor of the Providence United Methodist Church in Charlotte, which had over 2,200 members in their congregation. So we want to welcome Bishop Ken Carter as our 2021 Houston Preaching Mission speaker. I want to take a few minutes to read to you some history of the Houston Preaching Foundation. It's a self-perpetuating gift where every year the proceeds from the principal of this foundation goes to support outstanding and excellent preaching at our church, bringing in speakers to our community. It was started by Dr. William Cyrus Houston and his wife Nina in 1948. And for over 70 years, the annual event has brought wonderful speakers to our church throughout the world. Preachers have come from all parts of the United States, Canada, England, South Africa, Kenya, and other parts of the world. The tenets of the foundation, according to Dr. Houston, is to bring the highest ideals of the Christian faith to our community. The preaching mission traditionally has been held in October of each year and has included music and food for dinners and lunches, which we have had. For a number of years, the church congregation had attended lunches at the Concord Hotel after the 11 o'clock service and had the famous fried chicken at the Concord Hotel, which many of you remember. In my 33 years of membership at Central United Methodist, I have a few highlights just to mention of my memories, and as we get older, our memories are not maybe as good as they were when we were younger. That's why I want to read from a few notes. and also to emphasize the strong conviction of the Houstons when they established the foundation. It was started when Dr. Frank Jordan was the pastor of the Central United Methodist Church when the foundation occurred in 1949. And in the tenets of the foundation, which is an endowment, it was said that great biblical preaching should be continued work, and it should be done with a flourish. Dr. Houston had a lot of enthusiasm for inspiration, motivation, and deepening our faith in Christ. He wanted to see that we select the very best preachers that are available. Dr. and Mrs. Houston dedicated their foresight to bringing the best to Concord and to fill a podium with God's Word in a powerful and a creative way. Our first speaker in 1948 and 49 was Dr. David McClellan. He served as the senior pastor of the Brick Presbyterian Church in Rochester, New York. For over 70 years, this annual event has brought to our community the finest preachers and communicators of the gospel that we have known throughout the world. The speaker, according to the Houstons, should be selected without undue territorial or denominational limitations, it being the intent of the founders of this diverse opportunity to be a spacious intelligence, but fervent in spirit and truly humble in the Christian way of life. So they may be chosen on this criterion. Also, a big part of the mission has been music. Music can be very inspirational and motivational to the congregation. So much of the money which is generated from this foundation goes for outstanding music. And Susan RENZ, our director of music, has selected outstanding musicians to perform during the Houston Preaching Mission. She has a number of contacts of wonderful instrumentalists, soloists, oratorio choirs, and our own chancel choir. We have been fortunate to have many outstanding musical groups in the past: the Junaluska Singers, Norman Tabernacle Choir, many of the Charlotte choirs, and we've had a soloist named George Washington for a number of years sing and entertain us in the musical field. I'd like to just mention a few of the other speakers that have increased my faith and made an impression on me over 33 years as a member of the church. One of them, which I found to be quite humorous at times, was a lady by the name of Barbara Brokaw, who is a preacher in Texas. And she grew up in a very poor family and only had one or two dresses. Her mother would starch her Sunday school, her Sunday dress, and it was white, and the dress would stand up by itself. It had so much starch in it. But she spoke about increasing membership and getting the life of Christ into the homes of the low-income people. And one story I remember she told was that she had this very low-income family sitting in church with their children. They were not well dressed, and the father had a shirt with no sleeves on and barely covered his feet with old shoes. And one time he was absent at church, and she said, "Why haven't you come?" And he said, "Well, I'll come to church if you'll come to dinner at my place." So he lived in a trailer in Texas. So she came to dinner, didn't know what to expect, but when she was there, he said, "I've got one of the specialties for you." It just happened to be skunk soup. And she said, "I've never had skunk soup before." That was a new experience, but she grit her teeth and didn't pay much attention to the smell, but did enjoy the meal with the family. And he stayed and became a member of the church. And that made an impression on me. My neighbor, who's a Baptist, attended, and on the way out of the church, he shook her hand and said, "You should be a Baptist preacher the way you preach." He was so impressed with her powerful presentation. In 1989, we had Dr. Thomas Langford, who's Andy Langford's father. He was a professor at Duke Seminary, and he spoke as our preaching mission minister for that year. Prior to that, we had a bishop by the name of BEVEL Jones, who I remember very well. I like the name BEVEL, B-E-V-E-L. He was a North Carolina bishop, and his topic was Jesus as the magnificent obsession. And he spoke about what motivated him in preaching was a magnificent obsession. You never think of obsession as being magnificent, but his love of God, his love of Jesus Christ, made him declare that his role in life was to follow a magnificent obsession, which is Jesus Christ. And he said, regardless of what you are, whether you're a plumber, a teacher, secretary, a nurse, whatever your profession, make sure you do it to the glory of God. He was a very powerful minister and very meaningful message to our congregation. And in 1993, Ed Matheson, who had the largest United Methodist Church in east of the Mississippi River, spoke about growth of membership in the church. This is a problem we have even today, that church membership is falling down, and we need to recruit and retain more people into our church. And this is a phenomenon which is occurring throughout the country, that religion is falling off as a priority of the population. Ed Matheson had a number of suggestions on increasing membership. He spoke 2 times as our Houston Preaching Mission speaker in 1993 and in 2003. He had over 4,000 members in his church, and one thing that sticks out in my memory is when people made their pledges, they brought their pledge card to the altar, and he recommended that each one write 3 things on a 3x5 index card that they are going to do for the church and for their community. Things like work at Meals on Wheels, participate in Habitat for Humanity, teach a Sunday school, become an usher of the church, things like that, as well as your financial donation to the church. That was very effective, since the church needs to reach out from itself and to become part of the community, and not just do what's best for the church, but to do what's best for the bigger community in the area. Also, we had a speaker who was a bishop from South Africa, Dr. H.M. Dandala, who was the first African preacher for the Houston Preaching Mission, and one of Emily Beatty's favorite preachers or speaker was Dr. Ellsworth Callis, who is professor of preaching at the Asbury Methodist Seminary in Kentucky. And he has written several books. I will read a passage from one of his books here, which is entitled Life from the Upside, Seeking God and the Work in the World. Ellsworth Callis grew up in a very poor neighborhood, a very poor family in Iowa. He had no shoes going to elementary school, so he made cardboard shoes so he could attend school. But he passed away 3 or 4 years ago, but is very well known for his wonderful books that are used in Sunday school classes throughout the country. And he preached about various aspects of the Bible. And one of the things that really sticks out in my memory is when he was in seminary, his professor asked him to define church, and he didn't know how to define it, and he stumbled along, and the professor said, "Put your finger on your nose." And Callis said, Ellsworth Callis said, "Well, why do I do that?" He said, "I'm going to tell you what the church is." And the professor said, "Would you spell church?" And Callis said, "Well, of course I can spell it, C-H-U-R-C-H. And he said, "What are the two middle letters of church?" And he said, "U-R." And he said, "That's your answer. You are the church. And don't you forget it. I am the church, you are the church, we are the church." That made an impression on me, because it's not the preacher necessarily, it's not the bricks and mortar, it's not the classes, but it's the people. The people are the church. Very powerful message to the people at the mission. Then we had Don Davis, who is a storyteller. He appeared 2 times. He's from Western North Carolina, and talked about Jacob in the Bible, who wrestled with an angel and had a hip injury, and tied that into a man named Crippled Joe, who was a banker in Western North Carolina who helped people. So he tied in a real person to a biblical character. And the word Jacob, of course, means heel grabber, because Esau was his brother, and they emerged from the womb at about the same time, and Esau was the firstborn, and Jacob grabbed the heel of Esau when he was being born to pull himself out of the birth canal. So the word Jacob means heel grabber in Hebrew, but he spoke about Jacob and his experience in the Bible, which is found in the book of Genesis. Tony Campello was also a speaker, famous author, lecturer, teacher, who was highly renowned in the field of religion, was our speaker in 2014. We had Steve Mosley, who gave the whole Bible in 30 minutes, a review of that. And we had James Dotson, who spoke about changes in the Methodist Church with the LGBTQ movement and what is happening with divisions within the Methodist Church. So that's kind of a summary of the preachers that we have had in the past that I recall. There are many more. But in closing, I'd like to read a passage, I think, which is very timely for our situation in the world today and in our church. And it's, again, from J. Ellsworth Callis on the back of his latest book, Life from the Upside. It says, "I confess that I am an unreconstructed optimist, not a naive one. I've lived too long for that, long enough to have experienced a resounding case of pessimism. If you ordinarily look at life through the general news, with its constant reports of disaster and decline, evil and insanity, I think you would know what I mean. We do have a lot of evil in the world, a lot of challenges, a lot of divisions, and a lot of it doesn't make sense to us. But the next paragraph is the most powerful one, when he says, "But God, there is God, and because there is God, there is goodness. I profoundly believe that God is at work in our world, and that our planet has not yet been written off as a lost cause. Through our human race, though our human race appears so often to decline itself to its own destruction, God is always at work, usually, I think, behind the scenes, and because of God, we have faith, love, and goodness keep being reborn." So our prayer now through the Houston mission is that we can rediscover God, and that we can find our faith, and we can overcome our adversities. And I challenge you all to deepen your faith, to attend the Houston Preaching Mission October the 3rd. And thank you for this opportunity to relate some of my memories to you. And may God bless you, and may God bless Central United Methodist Church. Thank you.